The issue is looking at what true sustainability in food means. I'm interested in those figures. They give you, I'm assuming that's the carbon to transport them. Yeah. What it doesn't tell you is the carbon to make them, to produce them. Bananas, pineapples are an interesting subject because you're not going to have them here in the UK. What needs to be looked at is true sustainability. For very many years, we've looked at food miles and seen it as an indices of how big a carbon footprint your food has. Problem is that since then, a new discipline called whole life cycle analysis has developed, which looks at everything that goes into your food. And when you do that, the proportion of the carbon footprint of your food caused by its transport falls to about 2 to 4%. It's very, very small. What matters is how your food was produced, not where.
OK, so I go to the supermarket and I don't know, I see Granny Smith apples from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I see Cox's apples from Somerset here in England. Shouldn't I buy the English ones if I want to be eco-friendly?
There are two sides to this argument. It's really, really complicated. Food miles was brilliant because it was so simple. You knew what to do. Now, the first thing to say is it's not guaranteed, I'm afraid, that a Somerset apple has a smaller carbon footprint. New Zealand is very, very good at growing apples, and it's entirely possible the carbon footprint of those apples is smaller, despite being shipped in cold storage. As long as it's shipped, not flown. Flown is a very bad way to bring stuff into the country. But there is another argument which is very important. Britain's self-sufficiency in food has dropped disastrously, mostly as a result of supermarket policies, from about 72% to nearly 50%. And we actually need to get our self-sufficiency up because of massive global changes going on in food supply.
But how are we going to do that if people are buying all their apples from New Zealand?
Well, actually, one of the arguments in the book is that actually we need to start buying much more British produce, because only that way can farmers invest in the agricultural base and invest in sustainable farming techniques.
OK, so what about, I don't know why I'm picking on New Zealand products, but say lamb.
Well, New Zealand has very, very good landscape when it comes to lamb. There was one particular report, which a lot of people argue over, but it basically showed that the carbon footprint of lamb produced in New Zealand brought to Britain was about a quarter of that in Britain. There is a serious issue there. New Zealand's very good at it. It has to be said, we're not always going to be front of the queue to get this stuff. One of the major global changes is an explosion in the middle class in China and India and Brazil and Indonesia, and they're now queuing up for all the stuff we used to think was ours. So there are lots of grounds for us to invest in British agriculture, improve our sustainability, improve our farming methods. I'm afraid British farmers haven't been brilliant at that.
What about the fact that our children are growing up thinking there are no such things as seasons for eating fruit or vegetables?
Seasonality is a very, very curious one. In a time when we get our music from one part of the world and our fashions from another and our films from another, a lot of seasonality is a social construct. We build it into our lives because we like the idea of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Aesthetics are very important in food. I'm a restaurant critic for The Observer. That's part of what I do. I care about how things taste. But it's different from sustainability and looking at the carbon footprint. And a lot of what I'm saying is you cannot assume you know, because of these buzzwords, local, seasonal, organic, that they are the most sustainable model. And we need to be feeding 9 billion people by 2050. We're going to have to produce 50% more food by 2030 on the same amount of land. Carbon footprinting is absolutely vital.
And so therefore, is your argument, I don't know, if you can grow tomatoes, strawberries, whatever, in Morocco in nice sunshine in April, possibly better to bring them to the UK than to have polytunnels across our countryside growing things very expensively.
It's an interesting argument, and there is a lot of validity to it. I do honestly believe invest in British agriculture to enable British agriculture to become more sustainable. But we also have to look at the global picture, and what's going on in Morocco may actually be more sustainable than what's going on here.